They dumped snow on my lawn for 3 winters straight, and I didn't do anything about it. Not at first. Honestly, I told myself it wasn't a big deal, just one of those annoying neighbor things you shrug off and move on from. But looking back now, that first pile of snow was the beginning of something way bigger than I ever expected. So I live in a pretty quiet town, nothing fancy, just one of those places where people wave even if they don't know you, where lawns matter more than they probably should, and where everyone kind of assumes things will stay the way they've always been. My house sits right next to a small shopping plaza. Not huge, just a grocery store, a laundromat, a couple of takeout spots. The kind of place that's busy enough to matter, but not busy enough to feel like a city. When I bought the house, one of the things I actually liked was that strip of space between me and the plaza. It felt like a buffer, like I had my own little corner of quiet even though there was a parking lot on the other side. I remember the realtor saying something like, "That extra space back there? That's all yours." And I didn't think much of it at the time, just nodded, thought, nice, more grass to mow, didn't realize how important that detail would become later. The first time it happened, it was early December. We got one of those heavy overnight snowfalls, the kind where everything looks clean and peaceful in the morning. I made coffee, looked out the back window, and saw this small pile of snow right at the edge of my yard, maybe 3 feet high, not very wide, just kind of sitting there like it didn't belong. I remember standing there thinking, that's weird. But I didn't jump to conclusions. The plaza had just switched snow removal companies that year. I'd seen new trucks around, different logos, so I figured, okay, probably just a new guy. Doesn't know where the property line is yet. No big deal, right? People make mistakes. So I let it go. A few days later, the snow melted a bit. Nothing looked too bad, and I forgot about it until the next snowfall. Same thing, except this time the pile was bigger. And it wasn't just snow anymore. There were little bits of gravel mixed in, some dirt, even a crushed soda cup sticking out of it like a flag. And that's when I started to feel that little itch in the back of my mind, like something wasn't quite right. Still, I told myself, give it time, they'll figure it out. But they didn't. Every single snowfall after that, their plows would come through that parking lot like clockwork, clean everything off, and then just push all of it straight onto my yard, like my property was some kind of overflow zone they could use whenever they felt like it. By mid-January, my lawn didn't even look like a lawn anymore. It looked like a dumping site. The pile kept growing, not just higher, but wider, heavier, packed with ice, road salt, trash. I found cigarette butts in there, plastic wrappers. Once even a single sneaker frozen halfway into the pile, like someone had just given up on it mid-step. And the thing about road salt, if you've ever dealt with it, it doesn't just disappear. It kills everything it touches, grass, soil, whatever's underneath. It leaves this ugly, dead patch behind that takes forever to recover. So now it wasn't just annoying, it was damage. That's when I decided to call. I tracked down the number for the plaza management office, which wasn't exactly easy, got bounced around a bit, left on hold long enough to question my life choices, eventually ended up talking to a guy named Rick Dalton. Not the movie star, just a tired-sounding manager who clearly didn't want to be dealing with this kind of call. "Yeah, I've heard something about that," he said, like he was already halfway checked out. I explained the situation, tried to keep it calm, reasonable. "Look, I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it, but your plow guys are dumping snow onto my property, and it's causing some damage." He paused for a second, then said, "I'll take a look into it, see what's going on." That was it. No apology, no follow-up questions, just, "We'll look into it." And for a brief moment, I believed him. A week went by, then another snowfall. Same thing, maybe worse. So I called again. This time, Rick sounded a little less patient. "Yeah, I talked to the plow company," he said. "They're under contract, they're doing their job." I remember leaning against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear, just staring out at that growing pile like it was mocking me. Okay, but their job shouldn't include dumping everything on my land. Another pause. "Well," he said, "if you think there's an issue, you'll have to take it up with them directly." And just like that, it wasn't his problem anymore. That was the moment something shifted for me. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization, like, oh, this is how it's going to be. So I called the plow company, got a dispatcher first, then eventually someone who claimed to be the supervisor. I explained everything again, same calm tone, same attempt to keep things reasonable. And his response? We follow the property lines we're given. I said, well, then your property lines are wrong, because you're pushing snow onto my yard. He let out this little half laugh, like I'd just said something mildly entertaining. Then you'll have to prove that. Not aggressive, not even rude. Really, just dismissive in a way that somehow felt worse. Like I didn't matter. Like my property didn't matter. Like this was just how things were going to be, and I could either accept it or waste my time fighting it. I hung up the phone and stood there for a while, just thinking, staring out at that mess of snow, salt, and garbage slowly taking over my yard. And for the first time, I stopped thinking of it as a mistake. Because mistakes don't repeat themselves like that. This was a system. And I was the part of it that didn't have a voice. At least, not yet. So that night, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I started digging, not in the snow, but in paperwork, old documents, anything I could find about my property. Because if there's one thing I've learned about situations like this, it's that people only ignore you until you show up with proof. I pulled out the closing documents from when I bought the house, flipped through pages I hadn't looked at in years, most of it legal language that might as well have been another language back then. But now I read it slower, more carefully, like there was something hidden in there waiting for me to notice it. And that's when I saw it again. That same note the realtor had mentioned, the boundary line, clearly marked, extending just a little farther than the edge of the plaza's parking lot. Not by much, but enough. Enough to matter. Still, I knew paperwork alone wasn't going to cut it, not against a company that had been operating like this for who knows how long. So I called a surveyor. The guy's name was Ethan Caldwell. Sounded like the kind of person who took his job seriously, and when I explained the situation, he didn't laugh, didn't brush it off. He just said, yeah, happens more than you'd think. That sentence stuck with me, because it meant this wasn't just my problem, it was a pattern. We scheduled it for the following week. Cost me $800, which, I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled about. But at that point, it wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about not being pushed around on something that was clearly mine. The day he came out, it was cold, the kind of cold that bites through your jacket no matter how many layers you've got on. I watched from the window at first, coffee in hand, as he set up his equipment, marking points, taking measurements, moving slowly but deliberately. There's something about watching someone measure your land that makes everything feel more real, like suddenly it's not just your yard. It's lines, numbers, boundaries that actually mean something. After a couple of hours, he knocked on the door. Got a minute? We walked out back together, snow crunching under our boots, and he pointed toward the edge where my yard met the parking lot. You see this line here? He said, tapping one of the markers. Yeah, that's yours, and it doesn't stop where you think it does. I felt my stomach drop a little. He walked a few steps further into what I had always assumed was part of the plaza. And this is also yours. I remember just staring at him for a second, then looking past him, at the asphalt, the painted parking lines, the dumpster sitting a little too comfortably near the edge. How far does it go? I asked. He glanced at his notes. About 6 feet, all the way along the back. 6 feet. Doesn't sound like much, until you realize what fits into 6 feet across an entire property line. Parking spaces, a loading zone, a dumpster area, all of it sitting on my land. And not just recently. Ethan estimated it had probably been that way for over a decade, maybe longer. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. So you're telling me, I said, they've been using my property this whole time? He gave a small shrug. Looks that way. That was the moment everything shifted. Because now this wasn't about snow anymore. This was about land, ownership, and a company that had gotten a little too comfortable treating something that wasn't theirs like it was. I paid Ethan, got the official survey documents a couple days later, clean, precise, undeniable, lines drawn exactly where they were supposed to be, measurements that didn't leave room for interpretation. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to call Rick again. I wasn't going to argue with the plow company. I was going to go straight to the people who actually owned that plaza. So I drafted a letter, kept it simple, professional, no emotion, just facts. Attached the survey, highlighted the encroachment, and gave them 30 days. 30 days to remove anything that was sitting on my property. Dumpster, parking spaces, loading area, all of it. I sent it certified mail, and then I waited. For about a week, nothing happened, no calls, no emails, just silence. And I'll admit, Part of me started wondering if maybe they were just going to ignore it, hope I'd drop it like I almost had before. But then the letter came. Not from Rick. Not from anyone I'd spoken to. From a law firm. Thick envelope, formal letterhead, the kind of thing that immediately changes the tone of everything. I opened it at the kitchen table, already knowing this wasn't going to be a friendly response. And it wasn't. Their argument was simple and, honestly, kind of bold. They claimed adverse possession. Basically, they were saying, yeah, maybe it was your land once, but we've been using it long enough that now it's ours. I sat there reading that line over and over again, feeling this mix of disbelief and irritation building in my chest. Because the confidence in that claim, it told me something. It told me they thought I wouldn't fight it, that I'd see a legal term I didn't fully understand and just back off. But here's the thing. I might not be a lawyer, but I'm not clueless either. So I called one. Her name was Laura Bennett, recommended by a friend who dealt with a property dispute a few years back. And from the moment I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. Yeah, that's not going to hold, she said. Why not? Because adverse possession requires continuous, uninterrupted use without permission, and if there was ever permission given, even informally, it breaks their claim. That word permission, it triggered something. Because when I bought the house, there had been a box of old documents from the previous owner, most of it random stuff, receipts, notes, things I'd never paid attention to. Until now. I told Laura I'd look into it, hung up, and went straight to the garage where I'd shoved that box years ago. It took a while, digging through old papers, faded ink, things that probably hadn't been touched in over a decade, but eventually, I found it. A handwritten note. Short, simple, but clear. The previous owner had allowed the plaza to temporarily use that strip of land during some kind of construction project, years back. Temporary. That one word changed everything. I took a picture, sent it to Laura. She called me within 10 minutes. This is exactly what we need. Her tone had shifted, sharper now, more confident. They don't have a case anymore. And just like that, the balance started to tilt. She drafted a response, stronger, more direct, no room for misinterpretation. 14 days. That's what they got this time. 14 days to remove everything, or we move forward with legal action, including daily fines for continued encroachment. We sent it out. And this time, they responded quickly. No more legal threats. No more claims. Now they wanted to talk. The first offer came through a phone call, not from a lawyer, not from Rick, but from someone higher up, a guy named Martin Hale. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of person who's used to negotiating his way out of problems. We'd like to resolve this amicably, he said. Of course you would. He offered to buy the strip of land. The number he gave me. I won't even repeat it, because it was so low it felt almost insulting, like they were still testing whether I'd fold. I didn't even pause. No. He tried again, bumped it up a little. Still no. And here's the thing. It wasn't about squeezing them for more money. Not at that point. It was about something else. Respect. Because for years, they hadn't shown any. Not when they dumped snow on my yard. Not when they dismissed my calls. Not when they told me to prove something that should have been obvious. So now, I wasn't in a hurry to make it easy for them. We went back and forth for a bit over the next few days, numbers going up, tone getting slightly more urgent on their side, but I held my ground. And then, March came. The snow started to melt. And what it revealed was worse than I expected. My lawn was destroyed. Not just patchy gone. Dead grass, deep tire ruts, soil compacted so hard it looked like it had been paved over. It was like looking at a scar. And standing there, hands in my pockets, just taking it all in, I realized something. I was done negotiating from a distance. Because up until that point, everything had been letters, calls, offers, controlled, polite, detached. But they hadn't actually felt the consequences yet. Not really. And that's when the idea hit me. Not out of anger, not exactly. More like clarity. If they weren't going to respect the boundary, then I was going to make it impossible to ignore. So I stopped waiting for another phone call, stopped checking my email every hour to see if they were ready to resolve things amicably, and instead, I picked up my own phone and called a fence company. The guy who answered introduced himself as Darren, sounded straightforward, no nonsense. I told him I needed a chain-link fence installed along a property line as soon as possible. He asked, "You got a survey?" I said, "Yeah, a very clear one." There was a short pause, then a slight chuckle on his end, like he already understood the situation without me having to explain it. "All right," he said, "we'll take a look." 2 days later, he came out, walked the line with me, boots crunching over what used to be grass, now just a mix of mud, salt, and flattened earth. He didn't say much at first, just nodded here and there, measuring, marking. Then he glanced over at the parking lot, the cars, the painted lines, the dumpster sitting right where it shouldn't be. "You're going to make some enemies with this," he said casually. I shrugged. "I think I already did." He smiled a little at that, not surprised. We scheduled the install for the end of the week, and I didn't tell anyone. No warning, no heads up, no final courtesy call, because I'd already given them that multiple times. This wasn't retaliation. This was enforcement. The morning they started, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because I couldn't not be awake for it. There's a certain kind of energy when you know something is about to shift, something tangible. Darren and his crew showed up right on time. Trucks pulling in, equipment unloading, metal clinking in that sharp, unmistakable way. I stood by the window for a minute, coffee in hand again, just watching, same spot where I'd stood months earlier, staring at that first pile of snow, except now, everything felt different. Now I knew exactly where the line was. And more importantly, so were they about to. They started setting the posts first, one by one, straight into the ground along the surveyed markers. No guesswork, no approximation, every inch measured, deliberate. And with each post that went in, something shifted on the other side. At first, people didn't notice. A few cars parked like normal. Someone walked into the laundromat carrying a basket, completely unaware that half the space they were standing on technically wasn't part of that plaza anymore. But then the fence started to take shape. Metal stretching between posts, forming a line that hadn't existed before, at least not visibly. And that's when the confusion started. I saw a guy pull into one of the spots near the edge, hesitate, then back up slowly like he was. And sure if he was allowed to be there anymore. Another car circled twice before leaving altogether. By midday, it was obvious. 12 parking spaces gone. Just like that. The dumpster? Half enclosed. The loading area? Cut off at an angle that made it almost unusable. It wasn't dramatic in the loud sense. No explosions. No shouting yet. Just this quiet, creeping realization spreading across that parking lot that something had changed. And then my phone rang. I didn't even need to check the caller ID. "Are you serious right now?" "Rick." No greeting, no build-up, just straight into it, voice tight with frustration. I leaned against the counter, looking out at the fence now fully visible, catching the light in that dull metallic way. "Yeah," I said calmly, "I am." "You can't just block off access like that," he snapped. "We've got businesses here, deliveries, customers. You've got a property line." I cut in, still calm. "And now you can see exactly where it is." There was a pause, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he didn't like what I'd just said. "This is going to hurt us," he said finally. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It already hurt me. Silence again. Then, predictably, "This is the plow company's fault. We didn't." I let out a small breath through my nose. "You hired them." That landed. Not loudly, but solid. And for the first time in this entire situation, he didn't have a response ready. He muttered something under his breath, then the line went dead. I stood there for a second, phone still in my hand, and I won't lie, there was a part of me that felt something close to satisfaction, not because I wanted to hurt their business, but because for once, the inconvenience wasn't one-sided. 2 days later, everything changed again. New number, different voice. "Hi, is this Daniel Reed?" Calm, professional, measured in a way Rick never was. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name's Claire Whitmore. I represent the ownership group for the plaza." Ownership group. So now we were talking to the people who actually mattered. "I wanted to reach out personally," she continued, "and say we should have handled this differently from the beginning." That caught me off guard a little. Not the words themselves, but the tone. There was no defensiveness in it. No subtle blame shifting. Just acknowledgement. "I'd like to fix this," she said. And for the first time since all of this started, it actually sounded like someone meant it. We met in person the next day, sat down at a small table inside one of the empty storefront offices, no lawyers this time, just two people trying to untangle a mess that had gone on way too long. She didn't waste time. "We'll restore your lawn completely," she said, "professionally, soil replacement, regrading, new grass, Whatever it takes. I nodded, but didn't say anything yet. We'll also cover your survey and legal fees. Still listening. And we'd like to discuss an easement, a formal agreement that allows us to use that strip of land properly with compensation. There it was. The word they should have started with months ago. Compensation. 15,000, she said. I shook my head almost immediately. No. No anger. No hesitation. Just no. She studied my face for a second, recalibrating. 30. Another pause. Another no. And here's where it gets interesting, because at that moment, I realized something about myself. If this had happened earlier, before the calls, before the dismissal, before the snow and the damage and the legal back and forth, I probably would have said yes to 15 without thinking twice. Maybe even 10. But now it wasn't just a transaction. It was the full weight of everything that had led up to this moment. The inconvenience, the disrespect, the time, the principle. She leaned back slightly, exhaled, then nodded like she'd come to a decision. 50,000, she said, for a 10-year easement. The room went quiet. Not tense, just still. Because we both knew that was the number. I looked at her for a second, then out the window toward the fence line. Visible even from there, a clean, straight boundary that hadn't existed before. Plus full restoration, I said. Done. Irrigation system. Done. Privacy hedge along the line. She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Done. And a new snow removal contract, with a no-dumping clause on my property. This time, she didn't even pause. Already in progress. I let out a slow breath. Not dramatic, just final. All right, I said, then we have a deal. We shook hands. Simple as that. Over the next few weeks, everything changed again. The lawn was restored, not just patched, fully redone, better than it had been before. New irrigation system installed. A row of hedges planted along the boundary, giving me back that sense of privacy I'd originally liked about the place. They covered every cost, just like she said they would. And eventually, the fence came down, moved back 6 feet to reflect the new easement. The parking spaces reopened. The dumpster repositioned. The loading zone adjusted. From the outside, it probably looked like nothing had ever happened. Just another quiet property line between a house and a shopping plaza. But I knew better, because every time it snowed after that, I'd look out the window, coffee in hand, same as before, and the plows would come through, clear the lot, and stop exactly where they were supposed to. No spillover. No mistakes. Just respect. And here's the thing I still think about sometimes. If I had said something sooner, really pushed back the first or second time it happened, maybe it wouldn't have escalated the way it did. Or maybe they would have kept pushing anyway. Because some people don't notice boundaries until you make them impossible to ignore. So I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have taken the first offer and avoided all the conflict, or gone all the way like I did? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, even now, I'm not sure where the line is between standing your ground and letting something small turn into something much bigger than it needed to be.